So we know you all have been sitting for a while. We just have two brief things coming up in the next few minutes. One of them is a little bit of a surprise that someone in Washington arranged for everybody here today. I am honored. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but myself and Nick are actually products of an incredibly entrepreneurial company, News Corporation, which, as a lot of you probably know, is the most global media conglomerate in the world. We were privileged to work with great people like Liz Klayman when we were there. We were there for almost 6 years. While we were there, we got to meet Chancellor Klein, who was the Chancellor of New York Public Schools, an incredible figure in the education world and someone who recognizes the value in public-private partnerships, especially in the realm of education. He is now at News Corporation, and what's interesting that he's doing is developing an entire new division at News Corp, all focused around education. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to introduce Joel Klein.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief. I'm sandwiched between you and your break, so I know your priorities. But I just wanted to actually pick up on the last panel because people always ask for real-world examples, things that work, and why there's so much resistance to what seems like such an obvious idea. And to me, the greatest example of this has got to be K-12 education in the United States. Here we are in a situation where really our education system, by anybody's measure, is not remotely performing the way it needs to do. Today in America, about 7 out of 10 kids graduate high school. Think about that. 3 out of 10 without a high school diploma. Of the 7 that graduate, at least half, and probably more than half, are not prepared for college. Globally, the U.S. is falling further and further behind. The recent data showed that we're 31st in math, 23rd in science, 17th in English. When would those numbers ever be acceptable for the United States? And perhaps the most damning factoid is one that the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine recently put out. And think about this. Today, for the first time in history, America's younger generation is less well educated than its parents. Think about that. For the first time, our kids are less well educated than their parents. That is a prescription for failure. And you would think it would be a clarion call for all hands on deck in K-12. But when I became chancellor for Mayor Mike Bloomberg in 2002, what I found was an hermetically sealed system, a system that wanted no input, no partnerships, and basically wanted to continue doing business as usual. It shocked me to read that the iconic American labor leader, Al Shanker, described it. He said, "It is time to admit that public education runs like a planned economy. It's a bureaucratic system where everybody's role is spelled out in advance and there are few incentives for innovation and for productivity." That's why we're in the mess we're in. Now, because of Bloomberg, who was willing to tackle that, we set out the most aggressive public-private partnership that has ever been done in K-12 in America today. We shut down over 60 high schools, each of which was serving 2,500, 3,000 kids. And the bureaucracy wanted to replace them. First, they didn't want to shut them down, and then they wanted to replace them with traditional government-run schools. We went out and created the partnerships, opened up over 300 new small high schools in the city. That's more high schools than virtually any city in America has. Did them partnering with organizations like the Asia Society, the College Board, the New Visions for New Schools, et cetera. In other words, we brought in these partnerships to make them work. At the same time, in high-poverty communities, we opened up well over 150 charter schools. Again, transformative in ways that no other city has done. You go to Harlem right now, it's an entirely different system. And the results are compelling. They are compelling. Every study that's been done on this, the new small high schools in a double-blind matched study ended up with 10% higher graduation rates across every demographic, African American, Latino, special ed, so on and so forth. The charter schools in New York City are literally knocking the leather off the ball. Independent studies done by Margaret Raymond at Stanford have shown time and again that they're getting dramatically better results with the same kids. And let me give you one statistic that we all ought to learn from. This year in New York, there were 13,000 slots in those charter schools. And of those 13,000, for those 13,000 slots, over 70,000 families applied. People voting with their feet in order to get a better opportunity. Overwhelmingly, well over 90% of those families, African American or Latino, in communities where choice didn't exist. All of those charters were public-private partnerships. Indeed, if the mayor deserves credit, which he does for so many things, the idea that a monopoly school operation would literally outsource to its competitors, the charter schools, the opportunity to create these public-private partnerships and give kids opportunities. And you will see in the future, again, families waiting online while the traditional, the bureaucrats, the unions try to block access to new opportunities. And that, to me, is the key takeaway, is how long are we going to keep these organizations, K-12 public education, which needs so much help. I think the next frontier is going to be the area where News Corp and others are now working, which is to precipitate a digital revolution. And just as I was getting ready for this panel, or these comments today, rather, I had the privilege last night to read U.S. News and World Report, and I thought they put it best based on a science technology conference they held regarding K-12. And they said, quote, in K-12, teachers are crucial, but minting many thousands in the next few years won't happen. Technology is likely the missing ingredient based on the evidence that there are better ways to learn. Getting the good teachers to amplify their skills is the only solution. You can't mass produce enough to meet the new need. And it's amplifying those skills. It's going to again require the kind of public-private partnership that Mike Bloomberg put together in New York. It's going to require the private sector to make massive investments in trying to precipitate a digital revolution. Some will hit it, some won't. I have no doubt that the field is ripe for it. I have no doubt that we could transform K-12, and I have no doubt that the private capital is there to make it happen. The question will be, and the question the last panel addressed, is will government open up its doors to allow those public-private partnerships to exist, or will they once again look inward and insist that all knowledge resides in the bureaucracy, who will continue to perpetuate a model that serves the needs of the bureaucrats and the adults, but undermines the needs of America's children? That's why what Concordia is doing here today is so important, and I thank you for the opportunity to address you briefly what I think is the #1 key issue for America. Will we transform K-12? And it won't happen if we let the bureaucrats and the unions continue to run the monopoly. Thank you very much.